Hello everyone and welcome to the start of a new project. This engine that you can see here, you might be mistaken in thinking is a Gardner 2LW, but this is actually a Kromhout 2LS built by Kromhout Motor and Fabriek in the Netherlands. These were built under licence from Gardner. Kromhout built LWs, L2s, LKs and these, which is an LS. This takes sort of cues from both the Gardner L2 and the Gardner LW, so a bit simplistically, but the top end of the engine is Gardner LW, the bottom end of the engine is of Kromhout's own design, but takes a lot of its cues from the L2. So this engine doesn't have a sump as such, it has a bed plate, and the whole engine can be built from the top. There's no sump that comes off the bottom. Anyway, this engine has been sent in to us by its owner. This is out of a narrowboat, basically because he thinks this engine's had a failed big end bearing. It's knocking quite badly on one cylinder. So it's in to be stripped and investigated, and then reconditioned and put back together again. Now, we know this engine was restored about 10 years ago. Sort of the 2013-2014 period. So we're not expecting to find too much wrong with it, with the exceptions of whatever's wrong with the crank. So we'll get straight into it. As we go down through, I shall point out the sort of differences between a Gardner and one of these. I must add that there's a few things on here that aren't Kromhout either. They've clearly been made by the previous engine restorer, because the engine must have not been complete when they got it. So things like this oil pipe here, the drain from the cambox, that's not genuine, that's been made. So there's a few things on here that on other Kromhauts you won't see either. So anyway, we'll get straight into it, get the top end of the engine off. Okay, so we'll start off by stripping all the manifolds off of this side of the engine. The owner, as well as the big end problem, was suffering from it leaking oil from most of the joints here, there and everywhere. So we'll take a look at how it's assembled on the way and see if we can find anything that's been causing that generally, other than just not sealed gaskets. So we'll crack straight on, get all the intake and exhaust manifold off, and then open up the top end. So this unit here is a bit different for a sort of LW series Gardner. You did get these on L2s, but what this is an air heater. Depending on which way you push this lever, it either draws air in through the top and into the intake, obviously cold air, but also you can swap it over and it will draw air from here. And what you do is you undo this door here and light a paraffin fire in here, or kerosene, and that heats the air intake. So on a cold day you can use that to aid in cold starting. Okay, so to get the top water rail off here, we'll have to open up the rocker cover and take this return line from the injectors off. So we'll take the rocker cover off and take a look inside. Okay, with that out the way, we can now take this off. Oh, bigger spanner. Okay, so with that out the way, next up we'll get the injector pipes off, and the oil pipe work and the decompressors, because then we can move on to taking the cylinder head off. Unfortunately, we've already run into our first issues with this engine. I was kind of hoping we'd get a bit further down before we come across problems. So back about 6 months ago, the customer sent the complete cambox assembly in for rebuild, basically because it was leaking oil everywhere. And this whole assembly here was missing. It just had a blanking plate on the front of the pump. Because of that, there was no stop for the end of the rack, which meant when you open the throttle hard, the rack could go past maximum running fuel all the way up to maximum output of the pump, which basically meant under acceleration it was over-fueling. Now, first issue is if you follow into the engine, hopefully you can see all of this carbon. Now, normally they're pretty clean, but this one's actually got quite heavy carbon build up, and that is probably because it was able to overfuel and therefore wasn't burning cleanly. We fitted all of this for the customer, basically to put the limit stop back in for him for the rack so that it worked as it should. So anyway, we've got quite a bit of carbon. There is also quite large scores in the liner. I can feel these, especially this one just here. So that's going to need a new cylinder liner. So that's not good. Also, you might see what look like hammer marks in the tops of the piston. So it's starting to look like we're going to need pistons and new liners because of this one here that's all schooled up. You can also see all of the water jacket ferrules. So these here, the copper bits, have been distorted, and every one of them is misshaped. So I don't quite know what's gone on there, whether someone's tried to remove them and not managed, or taken them out and put them back. Either way, that's not how they should be. But the biggest issue is if we come over to the cylinder head. Obviously, again, you've got heavy carbon build up on both cylinders, but you will see that all of these valves are flush with the cylinder head face. And then, well, that one's actually sunk in a bit. Now, they should actually stick proud of the cylinder head. I just put up a bit of a clip of video of a new old stock head, so apologies for the rust preventative that's all over the face of the head, but I've put a valve in it and you can see that it sticks quite a way proud of the cylinder head in a as new condition. So this won't have just happened. This has been put back together again like this, but this is wrong. These valves are way too recessed into the head for what they should be. I probably should have noticed there was something up beforehand by the fact that the adjusters for the tappets were wound fully back and still had the correct clearance, which obviously meant the valve sits higher in the head than it should have done. So this will need correcting. So that'll be new seats, new valves to bring that back to the correct valve protrusion on all of these. New liners, because this one's damaged, and I'll have to have a closer look at this one. We won't put it back together again with these pistons, because this one is quite heavily hammer marked on the top of the crown by the looks of it. The other piston doesn't look too bad on the crown. There's a few marks, but not bad, but we will replace both of those. So we'll have a closer look as we take the block off as to the condition of the rest of the pistons. So we'll move on, get the cambox oil filter assembly off, out the way so we can start getting ready to lift the block off. Okay, so first thing here that's not very good. This casting, there should be a flat face here for it to seal on, but you can see there is a broken out area of the thread here at the top. So that's not brilliant. We'll need to do something about that to give it a nice flat face to seal on again. This is the oil filter that's inside. It's a washable gauze. So another problem with just this oil pipe here. This is the feed from the oil filter around to the main bearings. I don't know if you can see, I'll just turn the flash on. This was at the ceiling, and that's because there is a lump of solder on the inside of it that's been holding this away from its seat. So this had been leaking quite badly, but it's also full of silicone sealer around in there in an attempt to make it seal. But actually the problem is this lump of solder just here. So here we are with our first look inside. You see it's pretty clean inside, no big levels of carbon or anything inside, but what you can see is the timing chain is loose. This is actually rubbing on the actual crankcase here, and because of that you can see how much movement there is between the cam and the crank, so that would have been affecting cam timing quite badly. Also, the bearing on the end of the camshaft is in pretty poor condition. I think you'll probably be able to see how much this is all flopping around. There we go. That's knackered. So that'll be needing replacement. And we'll also check the other bearings as we go through the rest of the engine. Okay, with the timing case opened up, before we can get the cambox and injector pump off, we've got a couple of bits of pipe work to remove. We're going to start by removing this pipe here, and we'll test the non-return valve that's down in here. That stops the oil once it's primed up to the oil pump, draining back into the sump when the engine isn't running. If that doesn't work properly, then the oil can drain back, and it takes quite some time for the engine to draw up oil and therefore get oil pressure. So we need to check that, because that might be a cause for a failed bearing if the oil is draining back down. So anyway, we'll get this pipe off, unbolt the drain pipe here, and then take the cambox off. Okay, so I've just taken this pipe off, but I haven't turned it upside down. If this non-return valve on this is working properly, this pipe should be full of oil. There's nothing dripping out the bottom at the moment, so let's have a look, see whether anything comes out of it. Nothing. So that means that had drained back into the sump. So we'll need to do some remedial work on that non-return valve to make sure that that works. Okay, so with the cambox out the way, we'll take the alternator off, and then move around this side, take the water pump and the pipe work off, and then we can get ready to lift the block off. The bearings in that alternator don't sound very good. There's a lot of play there between water pump and I have to find what's causing that play, because that should be solid, because it should be connected to the camshaft. We couldn't really tell when we took this water pump drive off because it was quite grubby. It's had a quick spin through the wash. One thing I had noticed is there was quite a lot of play between the drive and the pump itself. And you can see that the square drive, so that what looks like a plus sign there in the middle should actually be square, is heavily worn. And again, that's not recent wear, that's been like that for some time. So the actual shaft itself in this is worn out. There's also quite a lot of play in the bearings. So this is going to need new shaft, new bearings before it can go back in the engine. Okay, so here we are with the cylinder block off, and you can see a better look at the damage to the crown of the piston on cylinder 1. There was nothing in the cylinder that would have caused this by the looks of it, so I would suggest that that damage was already there when this piston went back in the engine. I've had a quick check of piston ring wear against the groove that it's sat in. The limit is 15 thou on the top ring, gap between the ring and the piston. This piston's actually okay, it's about 10 thou on this piston at the top. But this piston here, there is over 15 thou of clearance between the ring and the piston. So this piston has worn upper ring grooves beyond the wear limit. This one doesn't, but it does have a lot of damage on the top of the crown. These pistons are also original Kromhout 5-ring pistons. So on a lot of Gardners, you won't have this ring down here. And depending on what type of piston you've got fitted, you will either have a similar ring arrangement to this with 4 rings, or you'll have 2 compression and 1 oil control ring. So anyway, we also had a quick look round and we found what caused the scoring on the bore. So this is the piston that had the scored cylinder liner that went with it. If I just move the piston bit so you can hopefully see it in the light, you could see there is a lump of something steel embedded in the side of the piston here, along with the side of the piston crown has been rubbing on the bore, so that is what's caused the scoring in the bore. So now we've got the pistons out, it's going to need a new liner. The scores run top to bottom and they're quite deep. But we have also found that we have what appears to be either worn little end bushes or worn pins. You can see there is quite a lot of play between the piston and the little end bush. On this piston, I can't feel any play between the pin and the piston itself. And again, if we look at this one over here, this one's the same. So it's going to need new pistons, new little end bushes. So we'll take the pistons off and then get further down into the engine. Right, okay, so we've moved on a bit from the last clip of video. We've had the parts cleaner running and it makes so much noise, just decided not to film it. We're trying to finish getting this to bits today, so didn't have time to wait for it to finish. So anyway, as you can see, we've taken the crankcase doors off the sides of the crankcase. So far, haven't spotted any big chunks of anything loose. Taking the end cover off so that we're getting ready to split the upper and lower part portions of the crankcase. We've also removed the camshaft. Now, camshaft lobes, all pretty good, nothing particularly of concern there. However, the camshaft itself is destined for the scrap bin. Now, this portion here, and this portion here is where the bearings run that the camshaft runs on. And hopefully if I get zoomed in enough, you will see there's quite a lot of corrosion damage there. Especially bad just here. You can feel that here. That's really quite bad. And the same right down this end. Now, this isn't damage that's just happened. This has been here for many, many, many years, because there's no indication of corrosion damage elsewhere in the engine. So this is old, it's not new. But anyway, that does mean we're going to have to replace the camshaft itself. Anyway, we're now going to move on and split the upper half of the crankcase from the lower. And we can look at the bit that I think everyone probably wants to see, which is the crank and bearings, and see what we've got there. So we're getting very close to being ready to take the crankcase top off, and we've been removing the oil pipes that link between this oil gallery here down to the main bearings. And what we have just noticed is this one here has quite a sizable chunk out of it, and it actually looks like it's cracked right through. It might not be, but it does mean we'll have to test it, and that might be a point of a leak and therefore loss of oil pressure. But we'll have a better look at this once it's out and pressure test it. Okay, so we've taken this oil pipe out. We're just going to do a quick test on it. So we've got some leak detection spray, and we're just going to blow it up with some air. No, so no leak there, although the pipe is damaged. Okay, so we've popped all the split pins out of both com rods. So we'll undo the nuts, pop them out, and take our first look at some of the bearings. It's not turning very easily at all, the crank. I can't get it, oh there you go, just got it started, but it's hell of a stiff to get turning, and it feels quite rough when you are, so expect to find something not very happy. So we'll get these nuts undone and come back when we've got the rods out. So with both connecting rods out, obviously they're clearly used, but there's nothing really wrong with either of the big end bearings. There's a tiny bit of marking on this that can be felt. We'll need to measure it up, but I expect light polish it will be fine. And this one here, again, there's an ever so slight mark right in the middle of the journal, but other than that, we've not found any horrors of yet. So we're going to move on, lift the crank out, and see if we've got anything with the mains. So here we are, fully stripped down to the crank. We're ready to lift the crank out. Before we do, we just thought we'd have a quick check of end float on the crank. We've come across a bit of a problem. So we're currently getting 0.08 millimeters, which is a little tiny bit over 3 thou of end float, which is wonderful, except the tolerance limit is 4 to 6 thou. So the end float on the bearing that's in here at the moment is too tight. Obviously that's much better than being too loose, because we can do something about that without re-pouring bearings. We've also got some slight scoring on all of the bearing faces. Nothing that I don't think polish would possibly take out, but we're going to measure it up in a minute. You can also see on this journal face here, there's actually some corrosion damage. Now, I would suggest looking at this that it was corroded, has then been ground, but this is still showing. This is the end cover that goes round the crank on the flywheel end of the engine, and you can see that this is a wear sleeve for the scroll that's on the end of the crank for retaining the oil, and it has been installed or moved a little bit lopsided, so you can see it's protruding this side, but it's flush this side, and because of that it has been rubbing on the crank, and I can feel ridges from the scrolls in it here. If we look at the scroll on the crank itself, you can see it's quite polished on the scroll, and that is where it's been rubbing on that casing. So that will explain why it was leaking at this end, because the wearing has been installed incorrectly. So we will need to install a new wearing, remachine it to fit around the crank properly. Okay, so we found our problem. Although all the bearings looked okay, quite obviously used, but looked fine, no lumps falling out of them. We've been miking up the crank, and there's a very small amount of ovality and a bit of taper on this journal and this journal. This one actually seems all okay, but number 2 here, hopefully you can see it. We've just put it back together again so you hopefully can see. There's quite a lot of slop in the bearing on this one. So unfortunately, although it looked all okay, number 2, big end has failed. So we'll need to pour new bearings for this. And because of that, we will probably do a light grind on the crank as well. Okay, so we've popped the valves out the head just to have a quick look at the seats to see if the valve recession was because of burnt out valve seats. Now, to be honest, I would have expected that maybe on 1 or 2, but not all 4. So didn't think that that was going to be the issue, but just thought we'd double check. The seats aren't in great condition, but they're not burnt out. So I think these have been cut like this and need new valve inserts, and probably did when this head was put back on. If you look at the valves themselves, you'll see that the 45-degree angled face that the valve seals on to the flat face of the head is virtually a knife edge. So if you compare that against a new valve, that's the original. You can see there's virtually a knife edge there. This is a new valve. You've actually got a rim to the valve. All 4 of the valves should have been replaced when this was to bits the last time. So to correct this, we are going to need to put new seats, new guides, new valves in this, because the original 4 valves are all scrap. Another thing on the cylinder head, now we've got it a little bit clean. It's had a very quick spin through the parts cleaner to get the worst of the muck off. As you will see that there are some marks in the face of the head right on the edge where the head gasket seals. So you can see these old scores and marking here. Where else did I see it? Oh, here. There's also one across the edge of the seal here. So this head also needs refacing because there's some sizable dings out of the face. And again, they're not new. They've been there for some time. So to finish this head properly, it's going to need refacing, new guides, new seats, new valves, to get it back to how it should be. And one final issue with the cylinder head, we've put it through the wash a little bit, and hopefully you can see it on the camera, is the actual gasket face is quite heavily corroded around both of the water ports in the top of the cylinder head, especially here. This is the worst area here, and it's actually the full width of the gasket, so there isn't a flat face to bolt the top water rail down onto. I don't think there's going to be enough material here to skim this area of the head to get these flat, so it might require another cylinder head casting. And here we are, fully stripped. Now, last issue to go on to the things wrong with the engine list is if we come right down into the bottom here, we've got all of this lovely glittery paste, which obviously is not good. So this engine, we have found number 2 big end bearing, although didn't look damaged, is worn, and that's what was causing the knocking, I think, for the owner. It was also pinching on the forward end main bearing, which is why it was difficult to turn by hand. The little end bushes were both worn to the point that they're outside of tolerance, so we'll need replacing. One piston had excessively worn upper piston ring groove. The other piston looks like someone's taken a hammer to the crown. Cylinder head, The valves, when they were put back in, by the looks of it, had been ground beyond the limit for the rim thickness on the valves. Also, the seats had cut too deep, so instead of the valves protruding, they were recessed into the head, which was wrong. On the flywheel end of the engine, the wear sleeve for the scroll for keeping the oil into the engine, that was in there lopsided, so it had been rubbing on the crank. And at the forward end, the same thing. The scroll was not actually within the forward end housing, so the scroll wasn't doing anything. Therefore, it had an oil leak at that end. So anyway, we'll have a chat with the owner about which way they want to go forward. And join us again next time when hopefully we'll be putting it back together again. If you've enjoyed watching this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.